Hi, and welcome back to Abilene People, the podcast here on BigCountryHomepage.com, where we talk to Abilene's most interesting people. And I guess a transplant from the Great Smoky Mountains who moved to Merkel, Texas, who now is the Reverend Guitarist out at Wylie Christian Church. That's right there. That's pretty interesting.
Well, let me add a little color to it.
Come on.
I went to school in Merkel, but I moved to Tye, Texas.
Tye, even better.
Oh, even better.
Even better.
So
better.
I was just before my 16th birthday, and I came from the Great Smoky Mountains of East Tennessee. I told you earlier I lived in Blount County. When you drove east out of Blount County, you were in the park.
Now, you're from that part of the country. And by the way, Doug Roysden. Doug is a musician, pastor, interesting guy that I don't know well at all, but my cousin is a friend of yours, introduced us, and I saw you play out at Doc's in Potosi right before Christmas. When you're in that part of the country, people talk about counties as much as they talk about communities. You know, like you're from this county, you go east, you're in the Great Smoky Mountain National Forest or park, all that. Tell us about that, because that had to be a fun place to grow up.
It was enchanted. It was completely unfair, Danny. In fact, after I grew up and started meeting other adults in life, and I found out that everyone didn't have the same childhood I had.
You feel sorry for them?
I did. I thought this is not fair.
Yeah.
So my grandfather kept me in the park all my life. I tell people I never went to church camp and I never joined the Boy Scouts because my grandfather kept us out doing all the things that you would learn.
Yeah,
there.
sure. So, your life was church camp and Boy Scouts.
All the time. Yeah. It was a great place to spend my childhood. And then right before my 16th birthday, my dad moves us to Texas. Like I said, to Tye. And like at the end of the B-52 runway at Dyson. And I get out of the car and I look out over the cactus in this little pond and I'm like, there really is a God, and he must be angry at me about something.
Well, it's a little different topography.
It was way different. I was very unhappy for the longest time, although after 50 years, it's not hard to call the big country my home. I tell people I grew up in East Tennessee. I came of age in Texas.
And the longer we stay here, the more beautiful this place becomes.
Oh, yeah. No doubt. Yeah.
And you get such beautiful sunsets.
Yes.
You don't get that back there because the trees in the mountains.
No, the sun goes away pretty quick.
And I was talking to you briefly before we began, so I know the answer that yes, you went to Cades Cove. People that don't know that part of the country and may never have heard of it, I'm going to quickly describe Cades Cove as a huge preserve in a cove in the middle of the Smoky Mountains that is still very much like it would have been in the 1800s. Is that fair?
That's absolutely fair. The loop through Cades Cove is 11 miles one way, and along the way you still see all the old church houses and the cabins where people lived and settled in there.
And there are people still living there. I don't know if they still do, but for a while there were people living there, old school lifestyles.
Yes. They declared it a national park, 1936, I think. It was President Roosevelt, and then for a while there were people that had property in there, and so for 2 or 3 generations they allowed that property to pass.
I recall that story now. Yeah.
I think by now everybody that owned private property in the park is. I think after 2011, all of that was.
Well, before we leave this beautiful part of the country and the beautiful part of your past, I just got to ask you, did you ever see Bigfoot or a Sasquatch in a Smoky Mountains?
I'm pretty pragmatic, dude.
You can't watch those shows without hearing about Great Smoky Mountains.
Okay, I don't want to get anybody upset. But if there really was a Bigfoot, I promise you I would have seen him.
You spent a lot of time outside. Okay,
so you got to eat something. So.
You moved to Texas, and I know you've done different things vocationally, but eventually you became a pastor and then went to McMurry and to Brite Divinity School over at TCU in Fort Worth.
Yes, exactly in that order.
Okay. You became a pastor, then went to school.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm always fascinated. I have a good friend with a doctorate in theology from Brite. She's brilliant, and I've always wondered what that experience is like. Did you enjoy going to Brite Divinity School?
I loved it. It was challenging. It was rewarding. It was exactly what I wanted to be doing at that time. I had a friend in Minnesota that was in the ministry, and he sent me an email right after I started at Brite. And his question was, so how's life in the pressure cooker? And that's a pretty good way to describe it. And at the time I went, I was also still the full-time pastor at Wylie Christian Church. I had a family with teenage kids at home.
Hey, how'd that work, Doug? Did you commute every day or every week, or were you going like once a month?
It was weekly. Brite schedules classes on Tuesday through Thursday. So all of their students have the weekend available to fill pulpits or pastor churches as need be. So, in fact, there are people on staff at Brite that help students find employment in churches. So.
My cousin Neil, who is the acquaintance that introduced us, Neil tells me he describes your church as a big believer in second chances. Is that about right?
Yes.
And describe that. Tell me what he means by that.
Well, the best way I know to say it is that when we started the church, there were folks in home churches that were sort of maybe not sponsors, but places where our leaders were coming from. They were really concerned that new church plants were basically about reshuffling the deck. We start a church and find Christians here and here and here that want to go to a different church. But we decided way early on that we didn't want to do that. We wanted to start a church for people. There were words, I don't really use this language anymore, but unchurched or dechurched. I like to think of it as we started a church for people who didn't have any faith in the church or was just fed up with the whole idea. And those were the people we were looking for. And so that it has sort of looked like second chances. And I don't think you ever run out of second chances. So.
That's beautiful. So you're also a guitarist and the lead singer for a band. And when I saw you out at Doc's in Potosi, I thought, wow, man, I didn't know anything about the other side. I just thought you was a rocker. Or, I don't know if you consider your music, rockabilly or what, but it's got a great sound. And then I learned you were a pastor. Those two have to be kind of interesting when you have a late Saturday night gig and you got to get up and preach Sunday morning.
Well, I don't have a lot of late Saturday night gigs. So, in fact, when I first went into ministry, I wouldn't leave the house on Saturday night. I was so concerned about Sunday morning. I wish I still put that much care in that. That I may have gotten a little comfortable over the years, but
you think you're a better guitarist, singer, or a better pastor?
Man, I don't know the answer to that. I was born to be exactly who I am.
So, great tip jar going up there. A lot of people putting tips. Maybe you ought to call it a tithing jar. People putting money in. No, I loved it. And when you say, how does your information say it? A Reverend Guitarist. That's a great attention grabber. Yes. How do people react to that?
Well, it's gotten to be pretty normal anymore. I mean, 25 years ago, when I stepped out into this arena, I was kind of an odd duck, but it's not hard to find long-haired pastors out there anymore. We're everywhere now, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess if you're, authentic, that's the thing.
To me, that's important.
It's just
one of my core values is authenticity, so I have a hard time not being that way, so.
Yeah. And when you preach, and I'm assuming you have services every Sunday, pretty much.
Yes, every Sunday.
When you preach, do you preach extemporaneously, or do you have a really detailed, prepared script you preach from, or how does that work for you?
Well, I play guitar improvisationally, and I used to say I preach improvisationally. But what people need to understand about improvisation is this. Great improvisational guitar players are good because you have studied the neighborhood so well. You know every alley, you know every main street. You just know how to get around. So if you know your scales and you know melodies and you understand theory, you can be a good improvisational guitarist. And so to say that I preach improvisationally, people would think, well, that means you don't prepare. You just shoot from the hip, and that's not true. I spend the entire week studying and getting ready for Sunday's topic, and so it's not really shooting from the hip.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell you, as I've gotten a little older, and I have, I make more notes now than I used to, so I don't trust myself to react and respond quite as quickly and as sharply as I did, say, 20 years ago. So
over the years, have you ever thought, well, this is what I'm going to preach on, and then gotten to the pulpit, said, you know what, there's something else on my mind. I got to talk about it. And have you done that?
Once or twice. I know people who love the drama in that. I'm tearing up my notes in front of everybody because God told me that God's got something to say today, and that's that. Right. And I don't laugh at that, or God has something to say, I think, every day. But I've not done anything that dramatic. But more than anything, I've had times when I go the whole week and I'm like, I got nothing. I just don't know why. And I can always go back to outlines and old notes and pull things out of commentaries. I can usually come up with something about any text that I could say to folks that they'd never heard before, because I've read a lot and I've studied a lot. But I remember you made me think about this. One Sunday, this has been a long, long time ago, and my daughter was a teenager, and I had decided that she needed to spend some time with our family in Tennessee. I didn't like some of the people she was dating, and this was a terribly hard decision, but, we decided to take her to stay with relatives, and she wasn't happy, so I didn't tell her about it. And as Sunday approached, I knew I was going to go to church, and then after church, I was going to take off and take my daughter to Tennessee, and I wasn't going to bring her back. And it was a hard week. And Sunday morning, I was on my way to church, and
You had a little bit on your mind.
I did, but I didn't think any of it was the right stuff. So I remember having a conversation with God that morning saying, thanks a lot. You've hung me out to dry this week. I got nothing. And literally, I was in Albertsons, or I think it was Albertsons then, and something said, go down this aisle. And so I went down the aisle, and there were some wash tubs there. And I just heard in my mind, just wash somebody's feet today. And so I bought these 3 little basins and some towels that morning, and I had nothing. So I went to church and told them, I got nothing, and it's a hard week, but I wanted to wash the feet of some people who helped me to make sense of things during that time. And so that's kind of what that whole morning turned into. But I haven't had a lot of those. Most of the time, I'm pretty well prepared. I show up and follow the little script I've made for myself in my head. So,
you said that you think God speaks every day. What do you mean by that?
Oh, man. Nobody's asked me that in a long time. I told a friend of mine once, I said, God can't hear your prayers. And she was just terribly upset. She's like, what do you mean God hears every one of my prayers? I said, no, I know what you're saying, and I believe you, but see, the thing is, God's trying to speak, and we're talking too much. And so I think I was just learning contemplative prayer then. So, and for those who don't know, contemplative prayer or meditation or contemplation, it's the practice of sitting in silence for 20 minutes at a time. And my mentors had encouraged me early on to reach the point where I could do this daily. And it takes some time. I got a good friend who says, start with 2 minutes and then try to go to 3. But it's a great way of just finally realizing, in my prayer life, I talk too much. I need to sit still and listen. And for what? Well, I don't know. But I'm just going to listen.
Isn't that kind of the point, though? We don't know.
I would think.
And when we don't know, that's when we're ready to hear something.
Yeah.
Seems to me.
Well,
I'm no expert.
It's not good knowing. It's better to not.
Yeah, and it seems like Jesus once said something like, go into your prayer closet, keep your prayers short, don't pray And, we've kind of done the opposite in the religious world, particularly the institutional religious world. And, I'm not a professional pastor anymore. I dabbled in that for a few years way back, but my sister goes to a little church down in Central Texas, and she asked me to come and speak down there. And, oh, boy, I made some folks mad because I was talking about Jesus and prayer, and I was making the same points you're making.
Yeah.
And it was right after that Supreme Court case where the football coach was talking about praying at midfield after a game.
Yeah.
And I just kind of offhand said, seems like Jesus discouraged that. What we ought to do is don't pray at the 50-yard line in front of a crowd of people in a football stadium. Go to your private prayer closet and pray.
Yeah.
And I got the distinct feeling, nothing about her little church, I'll just broaden it out. I get the distinct feeling that sometimes people prefer to listen to themselves more than they want to listen to Jesus.
Yes, and I think there's value sometimes in saying something out loud. Just go ahead and get it out there. But I think for me, prayer had gotten boiled down to a formula, and all of it was the right things to say. And I had to be taught that you really don't have to say anything. You don't have to say thank you because God is not as neurotic as people think. Yeah. And you don't have to say, forgive me. That's been done.
Yeah.
And to just be quiet for 20 minutes and to accept and be accepted. It's hard to beat that,
I tell a story that I always tend to be a little funny, but there's truth in this one, too, that when we lived in Fort Worth, there's a Krispy Kreme donut place that opened up not too far from our house. And the morning it opened, I went up there to get a dozen donuts.
That's religion there.
And let me tell you, there were cars lined up probably an eighth of a mile down Hewlin Street in South Fort Worth, and the parking lot was jammed. And so I tell people that I prayed to God, I'm going to take it as a sign from you that if I get in that parking lot and there's a spot near the door for me to park in, that you want me to get 2 dozen Krispy Kremes. And do you know, the 22nd time I went around the deposit right there. So God spoke that day, didn't he?
In God's time, right?
Yeah.
22 trips around the park.
Yeah. But sometimes people want to say it's God's time, but it's really their time. It
is. Yeah.
And what we need to do, as you're saying, is humble ourselves. I want to get back into the music. So the night that we heard you, my wife leaned over to me and she said, I don't know, I think Doug's got a little Willie Nelson going. Who do you compare yourself to, or who do you fashion yourself after? Anybody at all, or you give any thought to that?
No, I mean, so I gave you this list of different bands I played in, and I was in
a lot of them.
Yeah, I've been around here a long time. I graduated in the 70s. I was in a band when I graduated. We played classic rock, boogie-woogie rock, like Foghat. The next group I was in, Ambush, lasted throughout the 80s. And oddly enough, we were a metal band, and people used to call us Judas Priest Jr. Because we did more Judas Priest covers than anybody else. Our whole set list was British. And that was weird because it was during the 80s when New Wave and all that kind of stuff was really getting popular. And club owners would beg me to change my set lists, and I'm like, no. And then we kept selling the crowds out too. So, but then in the 90s, the group, the DRB, the Doug Roysden band, we were more roots rock and classic rock. And I don't know what you'd say that Shannon and I do right now with the act we have. I mean, we do, I think sometimes it's Americana, sometimes it's blues. It's very blues. Classic rock. I mean, we just do such a wide mixture of things. And I don't know who I would compare myself to. I'm not modeled after anybody anymore. So
yeah. And y'all were all plugged in that night, but do y'all do acoustic sets ever? Or?
We do. Shannon and I like to use them to kind of build a crowd and then bring the band in, because I mean, I could make more money if I didn't carry 7-piece bands around.
Yeah. Right.
But I love playing with people. I like being in a band with folks, and I like the synergy of collaboration with folks. I come up with some pretty good ideas, but if I can offer my best ones and I can glean the best from everybody else, then it makes things better in my mind.
You ever think about the parallels between a band and a team that leads a church?
Oh, yeah, all the time. People ask me. So I'm telling you, I was in bands that lasted 10 years at a time. And we all had aspirations to travel, and we all traveled. We all went somewhere, whether it was, 4 days to play gigs somewhere, or Ambush took off and went to East Tennessee for 9 months on our way to Los Angeles. But that's because we didn't have GPS back then. So, to keep a band together for 10 years and to live together like that. And then I started pastoring a church, and people say, well, that's a pretty big jump. And I'm like, oh, no, not at all. It's a whole lot of the same dynamic is involved,
Yeah, especially if you do love working with people,
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I used to say church would be great if it wasn't for the people.
Yeah, folks. Folks are folks.
Folks are folks. So I want to kind of end the conversation with going back to the theme of second chances.
Okay.
And I want to talk about that with our culture at large. We're taping this in a time where American culture is being confronted with a lot of upheaval, a lot of disagreements. People are polarized. And I don't want to get into the politics of it. When I want to get in is the people of it. People are broken. Yeah. And you have to see that, whether you're playing a gig at Doc's or whether you're at Wylie Christian Church. Yes. And you said, I don't think we ever run out of second chances. If you had a tonic you could pour out and give to people in America today to heal our brokenness, obviously you'd do it. But what's the tonic? Now, the setup answer is, for a Christian, that's Jesus. But what do people need? Let's breaking it down. What would you say? What's your advice to people if you had a chance to address the brokenness in our culture?
Man, I don't know. You reminded me of an episode of the Beverly Hillbillies. He said, what kind of tonic Granny was offering.
Oh, and that's I've tried some of that tonic from time to time,
for a lot of people, that is to be avoided. That's a dangerous and slippery ride especially for a lot of folks that just can't be moderate in things like that. Yeah. So I get that. But I'm reminded of Richard Rohr. I don't know if you've ever heard of Richard Rohr, but he was first an author that I respected, and then a mentor, and then a friend of mine.
So, wow.
But Richard, who would say, I'm a 1 on the Enneagram, and everything is so serious, and everything is just, good and evil. And it's just so serious. And he'd say, for me, one of my true consolations is this energy where you just become this person who just relax. Just have a drink and relax, okay? So again, I can't advocate drinking for everybody, and I'm sure not trying to sell Granny's tonic, but man, if we could all take a deep breath.
Yeah.
And I think to remember, when I was 18, I had a boss, Mr. Jose Fernandez. I wanted to say his name. He's a great, great man. And he used to tell me, youngin', remember words are something you can never take back. Once you say something, it's there forever, and the damage that it does is done, or the good it does is done. And I remembered that. And we live in an age now when words get typed out, and sometimes they're not even our words. We see a repost or a meme or something that just makes us feel whatever. I mean, relieved or patriotic or something. And so this thing about reposting, and I don't think folks realize that maybe somebody that you love matches that description, and they may not understand what it is you're saying. There's not context here. So I wish we could just be a little more careful with our descriptions of our adversaries, and I wish we could be reminded that Jesus said to love your enemies, or like Richard Rohr says, they're the only people that'll tell you the truth about yourself. So that would be probably a good prescription for today. Just take a deep breath. Try to love the folks that aren't like you if you can. If nothing else, just be charitable to them. That's a good biblical definition of love, is to be charitable to one another.
I like that a lot. I like that idea of just relaxing. People are wound tight.
Yeah.
Especially religious people,
Yeah.
What I find is that it's often, from my perspective, it's religious people that are most uptight about, gender issues, sex issues, sin,
The hot sins, they say.
hot sins,
Yeah.
And so they're all wound up about sin avoidance, and that's what they pursue. And there's little time to get back to really the original conversations about prayer. There's little time to just relax.
I spoke on Wednesday to a class that Dan McVeigh teaches, a J-term class at ACU, and Dan's he's a great theological mind. He's a fantastic person. And I walked in on the class ahead of the time for my wife and I to speak and sing. Dan was teaching on repentance, on the biblical word metanoia. And he said it doesn't mean literally to turn around or to change. It means to have a higher mind. And the opposite of it, anoia, is chaos and confusion. And so, but his comments, and I think he was so spot on, is that the church over these centuries has turned this idea of metanoia, to have a higher mind. It's turned it into repentance, that turn before you burn kind of thing. And it turned it into sin management. And when I think of sin, I remember what Brendan Manning wrote in the Ragamuffin Gospel, that what we call sin, the things you and I just talked about, are more accurately described as symptoms of sin. That it's a much deeper thing than that. And so I agree with Dan, though, that we turned it into sin management and forgot to teach people that Jesus is calling us to a higher way of thinking.
And I think it's oftentimes, I'm really not so interested in managing mine. I want to manage yours.
Yeah, yeah.
Sin management for the other guy.
That's easier to do.
Yeah, it's a lot easier.
That's a lot easier to do.
A lot easier to do. All right, I ask a lot of guests this last question. What would you love to see in Abilene in the next 10 or 15 years? What, more of the same, changes? I tell a lot of the guests when I ask them that question, because it hits them like, well, I don't know. One guest once said, I'd like to see a super target. I don't know. I'd like to see a all-you-can-eat buffet maybe. But what would you like to see in Abilene?
Wow. A super target. Well, I think there's a bigger HEB coming. That'll be great.
That's pretty good. And a Bass Pro Shop.
And a Bass Pro Shop. Man, I don't know. I would like to see a community where my grandkids and other people in their generation are actively involved and building for their own posterity. And I don't really have a preference what that looks like or how they do it. Because,
let them define it.
Yeah, my turn is almost over.
That's good. That's good. Well, I don't mean it's good. Your turn's almost over. I'm right there with you, but it's coming whether we like it or not.
Yeah,
I love it.
Might as well like it.
Might as well like it.
Yeah.
Doug, so good to see you
too,
and be
brother.
with you in this
You
conversation.
too.
Thanks
you.
for coming into the digital studio and being on the podcast.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Appreciate you. And
Yes.
we appreciate you being with us here. Appreciate TC, Travis Corrigan, over there on the switcherboard, our ace producer. And we will have another conversation in the very near future with another interesting person, maybe not somebody that is from the Great Smoky Mountains that had a personal encounter with Bigfoot like Doug has had, but maybe maybe somebody that started in Merkel and Ty and moved that way. We'll see. But we do appreciate Doug Roysden coming our way. And you got a concert you want to give a shout out for somebody listening that this week they might want to go see. Of course, you got a concert Sunday morning at church.
Yeah, every Sunday. Praise band plays every Sunday at church. I don't know when I'm playing next. GarageBand Woodstock is in July, and I play that every summer with the Fabulous Furies. I'll tell you this: Mitch McVicker is coming back to Wylie Christian Church in March, and he was a personal friend of Rich Mullins. He was in the accident that claimed Rich Mullins' life. And Mitch and I have become buddies over the years. He's come to our church once a year. So what I'd like to see in Abilene is more people come to the church and support Mitch and see him. So watch for that, and we'll put the date out.
Yeah, I need to keep my eyes open for that, and we need to help promote that here on the podcast on bigcountryhomepage.com.
Yeah.
And after, let's talk more about that, because I've got a buddy that was in the band at that same time with Rich.
Really?
So yeah, Kent Roberts. So we'll talk about that. All right, Doug Roysden, great to have you on the podcast, and we will see you next time here. I'm your host, Danny Sims. Thanks for joining us on Abilene People.